What's going on, y'all? It's your host, Anthony Modesto Milian. You know what's wild to me? Colonization. The idea that a foreign person, entity, whatever, can get a group of their friends together and go to a specific place, set up shop, and have their own rules and start telling like indigenous people or people that have already been there what to do is just insane. And it's just like, where do you get off? The amount of gall that takes. You know what I mean? And we've seen it throughout American history. We've seen what this very government has done to the Native American population. We see what the Dutch and the British did to South Africa. And today, currently, we are seeing the effects of that in the Israel-Gaza conflict, for lack of a better term. But the thing that I really do want to talk about is, like, we don't talk about how after World War II, colonies were set up all throughout South America. And we're going to talk about one specific one today on today's episode of Learn Something New today. In the 1960s, South American governments were selling land to anyone that had the money to buy it. And one of those people was a man by the name of Paul Schaefer Schneider. Now, if he was born in Germany, lived in Germany, and after World War II, he decided that he wanted to start over. But there's a lot of weird things about that. He did serve during World War II on the Nazi side, but he served in a German field hospital that was occupied in France. So we don't really know if he actually saw combat, but we do know that he was a Nazi. He did have a glass eye, and he would tell people that the glass eye was a result of a war wound. There is no way to actually prove that, because people that grew up with him always described him as poor and clumsy. All that aside, in 1961, he decided to buy farmland in Chile. He ended up purchasing 4,400 acres and a ranch, which he and his 10 followers began to prepare for a congregation. In 1963, 230 members traveled to Chile from Germany in the first wave of migration. And between 1966 and 1973, another 15 families migrated to Chile in 2 more waves. Now, it's believed that Schaefer and his followers were convinced to migrate to South America by a man by the name of William Branham. Now, Branham was a religious leader turned doomsday conspiracy theorist. He wrote manifestos and prophesied that there would be an imminent nuclear war that would devastate the Western world. Isn't it ironic, though, how doomsday conspiracy theorists and religious leaders often go hand in hand in making you scared to get control over you? That's just a side note. Now, Branham was extremely anti-communist, which means Schaefer and his followers that followed Branham were extremely anti-communist as well. Being German, from West Germany specifically, that was communist, they decided that that wasn't the best move for them. So they all moved to Chile, South America. But Schaefer was keeping a lot of secrets, the biggest one being that he tried to open up an orphanage in Germany, but it flopped because he kept getting accused of child molestation, and that seemed to be a big push for him moving to South America. Colonia Dignidad became a cult really, really fast. Now, in typical child molester fashion, it started with the control of the children. Schaefer kept children away from their parents in educating them and also in where they lived. He had special children's houses. Schaefer is quoted as saying that the problem in child education aren't the children, they're always the parents, because the parents are responsible for the sins of the children. On a side note, that sounds like something a pedophile would say. And if anyone said that to me about my son and why he should be away from me and in their care, that would put up extreme red flags. And regardless of whether I'm in Chile or South Carolina or wherever, I'm getting the fuck up out of there. He actually was really popular with the surrounding Chilean population for many different reasons. The main one being is that he built a hospital, and when Chilean children needed help, he treated them and he rescued a lot of the children in the region. But the interesting thing that I found out about this is that when he was involved in a hunting accident, he didn't go to the hospital that he actually had founded or started. He went to the hospital that was in Santiago, the main hospital that was the best hospital in Chile at the time. The story goes that Schaefer was hunting or doing something at night that involved a gun. No one really knows. Hunting doesn't seem like a nocturnal thing that you want to do, but again, I'm not a hunter. I just don't think it's right. It apparently he got into an accident and he was put in the hospital in Santiago for several months. When he got back, it seems like everything at Colonia Dignidad turned to shit. And he started ruling with an iron fist. He stopped all festivities. He separated the boys from the girls, the men from the women. And that didn't matter if you were married or not. It got to the point where some of the children were even running away. In 1966, a teenage fugitive by the name of Wolfgang Nies hid in the German embassy in Chile and later talked to the press. And he said some disgusting things about what was happening at Colonia Dignidad. In true German Nazi fashion, when Nies was on trial, Schaefer sent another child by the name of Harmat Hoop to testify against him in a smear campaign. Harmat Hoop accused him of being sexually promiscuous and engaging in sexual misconduct at his trial. Now, Nies was able to get extradited and moved back to Germany. And as a reward, Harmat Hoop was allowed to study in some of the best hospitals and the best schools in Chile, and he ended up becoming a doctor and working at the hospital at Colonia Dignidad. And it's believed that he was allowed to do this because Schaefer needed a doctor there. Now, as Schaefer grew older, he started to become more paranoid and more doomsday oriented. When Chile elected Salvador Allende in 1970, Schaefer's community turned the compound into a fortress of fear and dispossession. He came up with a plan to disguise Colonia Dignidad as a charitable organization because he knew that the containers for charitable organizations weren't checked by the Chilean customs. He used this as an opportunity to smuggle in guns from Germany. That includes machine guns, rifles, swords, anything that he could get into the hands of his people. He was able to get it through his quote-unquote charitable organization. He also invited local and foreign political dissidents to live at Colonia Dignidad. And he even pushed for Colonia Dignidad to be the base for the coup against Allende. And around this time, his torture of children became more and more evident. He started using cattle prods and other electrical devices to shock them and also to shock their genitalia to keep them in line. It was hell living in Colonia Dignidad. Now, the president of Chile, Salvador Allende, was eventually overthrown. We don't know how much Schaefer had to do with that, but we know that he was not a fan of Allende at all and had the guns and also the resources to overthrow an entire government. When Augusto Pinochet came into power after the coup, him and Schaefer were like best friends. The hospital at Colonia Dignidad started receiving state funds, and he turned Colonia Dignidad into one of the secret detention, torture, and execution centers for the Chilean Secret Service. In 1974, when Pinochet was visiting Schaefer, he was handing out gifts to Schaefer, and Schaefer was giving him gifts in return for any and everything. Pinochet gave Schaefer the rights to dig for gold and uranium, and in return, Pinochet got a Mercedes-Benz limousine. After the U.S. issued a weapons embargo against Chile, Schaefer said, "Don't worry about it." He met with people in Germany who supplied Pinochet with rockets, tanks, equipment, including biological weapons that hadn't been used since World War II. Now, as far as Colonia Dignidad being used as a torture and execution facility, it wasn't a secret. The UN knew about this. In 1976, the UN published a report about Pinochet, basically citing that Colonia Dignidad was the main site for torture and execution, and it was later verified by the Chilean government. The German embassy could no longer turn a blind eye to this because at the end of the day, these people, although they lived in Chile, were German citizens. So we had German citizens in Chile acting independently and using the government to do all sorts of illegal things. Germany sent a delegation of people to see what was going on. Then they got to Chile, they were greeted with Bavarian folk dance, and they said that they didn't have any evidence that there was any torture that was occurring. But they did say that they were still suspicious, but they didn't have enough evidence. So Germany kept sending delegations to Chile to see what the fuck was going on. And each time the delegations came after the first one, Schaefer absolutely said, no, you cannot visit our compound. In 1990, when Pinochet stepped down, Schaefer and the entire colony started scrambling. They privatized everything. All the businesses they had started, they made separate entities away from the colony. When the German chancellor visited Chile, he demanded that Schaefer open up the colony to let people see what was going on inside. And of course, Schaefer refused. Later, the state cut all funding off to their hospital after it was privatized. The hospital couldn't stay afloat, so Schaefer got a group of people together to protest the closing of the hospital, and he even marched to the Chilean government and demanded that they keep it open, which they did. Schaefer eventually reopened the colony to everyone and started letting only Chilean boys in. Now, the colony had no offspring, and it didn't let any people in and didn't welcome any more families. Local Chilean boys started coming out saying that Schaefer had brought them into Colonia Dignidad to molest them, and he was giving them sedatives and other prescriptions to knock them out to do it. And the physician that was prescribing the sedatives was the physician we heard earlier, Harmat Hoop. After 26 children who had attended the commune's free clinic and schools reported their abuse, a judge in Santiago issued a warrant for Schaefer's arrest. The Chilean police could not find him. Parents began pulling their children out of the school, and he often turned their departure into propaganda tools so that people could gain sympathy. But nobody was gaining sympathy from him or giving him any sympathy for what he was doing. On May 20th, 1997, it seemed like he escaped all child sex abuse charges because no one knew where he was. He completely had disappeared off of Chile's radar. Members of the colony ran to the German embassy to try to escape their own personal charges. And although Schaefer was nowhere to be found, the Chilean government still made him stand trial in absence, and in 2004 they found him guilty. But in March 2005 he was found, 8 years after his disappearance. He was hiding in a townhouse in an expensive gated community in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Schaefer was extradited to Chile again to face his charges, and essentially there wasn't much of a trial that needed to be done because he was already found guilty in absence. On May 24th, 2006, Schaefer was sentenced to 20 years in jail for sexually abusing 25 children and was ordered to pay 770 million pesos, about $1.5 million in US money, to 11 minors whose representatives had filed claims against Schaefer. Schaefer was found guilty of 20 counts of dishonest abuses and 5 counts of child rape, all committed between 1993 and 1997. On April 24, 2010, Schaefer died at the age of 88 at a hospital in Santiago, Chile. His death was ruled natural due to heart failure. And that's our show for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. My name is Anthony Modesto Milian, your host, and this is Learn Something New Today, a history podcast where we explore and do deep dives into history that's really not talked about, specifically for Black and brown people, because I am Black and brown. If you'd like to support the podcast, don't forget to hit up the merch store or my Patreon, both of which are in the show notes. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you all learned something new today.